Hey guys, what's going on? It's Codiak here, and today I want to talk about how you can keep your guild moving forward during content droughts, during tough times, whatever you want to call it. I want to help you guys get your guild moving forward in the direction it needs to be going. And there's just 5 simple things. I've kind of categorized everything and put them into baskets. And I'm going to share a little bit of the quote-unquote wisdom that I have about how we move EP forward during some of these down periods. Now, the first and probably the most important one is work through problems, not around them. Now, it's really easy, especially when things are slowing down, there aren't that many people online, to forget about the little things that pop up during raids, during other runs, throughout the day, things like that. Now, it's very simple to ignore these issues and work around them. And I have to admit, guys, it is the easy and it is the complacent way to kind of get through the day, right? You can ignore the issues that are plaguing the guild and basically just forget about them, hope they go away. But this is really going to cause a lot more damage at the end of the day, because raid members are going to get really upset really quick about these small little issues. And as leaders and as officers of guilds, your job should be to work through these issues and address them as soon as they pop up. Now, these can range from the most simplest basic thing to one of the most complex thing that you could possibly think of. But these issues all need to be addressed. One thing adds on top of another, and soon enough you've got a full-blown catastrophe on your hands. You've severed a few members from your team, and you're in a really bad place. So this is probably the most important tip I can give you guys. Work through your problems, not around them. It's not easy, it's not always fun, but it is the best thing you can do to keep your guild moving forward. Now, tip number 2 is don't get complacent and stay hungry. This is probably the biggest thing that is going to plague raid teams as they get further into a patch. Now, the desire and the kind of new feeling of a raid has well worn off, especially when we're talking about Nighthold, but you have to stay hungry. You have to keep wanting to kill the next boss. You have to keep wanting to put in the effort. And this is a really challenging thing for most guilds, because as soon as one person becomes complacent, that kind of spreads like a virus to the next people and the next people after that, because you kind of get this lackadaisical approach to raiding. Like, hey, I can show up, I can flask and food, and I can still be prepared, but I'm only going to give it about 80% of my effort because, honestly, I know we're just going to be doing this again next week. And that's a really terrible attitude to take, because what you're basically doing is setting off a chain reaction of complacency. And this is a really tough thing to kind of counter. Now, the way that I do it is by staying positive, staying focused, and keeping the team moving in the direction that I think it needs to move in. That means faster pull times. That means making sure that everybody is still accountable for the things that I expect during a raid. And this really stems from other members of the team too. You are always going to have members of your team that want to kill the next boss. They are going to stay hungry, and you need to tap into their energy to help keep the team moving forward. Now, obviously, there are roster and personnel issues that we could talk about, getting rid of the people that are complacent, but obviously, you've gotten this far with the team that you've had behind you the whole time. You want to keep that team moving forward. So tip number 2, stay hungry, don't get complacent. Now, the third tip is really a kind of a jump off the last one, and it's set standards and stick to them. Standards being show up on time, make sure you're prepared with food and flasks, make sure that you have rerolls. As you get later into a patch, people start slacking on the basics, and the basics are what kill raid bosses: mechanics and that kind of discipline and conditioning that you've worked towards up to this point. So you set those standards and you stick to them, and you sure as hell as an officer better be the first one to set and stick to those sets of standards and rules. And this doesn't have to be super crazy, it doesn't have to be militaristic, it just means set the bar high. Put yourself in a position to succeed by pushing your team and staying up there, pushing yourself to be the best possible team on the server, wherever that may be. So set those standards, stick to them as a team, and help each other stick to those standards. If you see somebody slacking off, you know, send them a whisper, say, hey man, let's go, let's bring it up, let's keep moving forward, we got a boss to kill. Because this is really deadly, and all these things snowball off each other, and soon enough, you've got 10 people online, 10 people are 50 minutes late, and the team is starting to fracture, and it's a really dangerous thing. The biggest thing about number 3 is being on time and making sure that your team is communicating your raid starts and things like that. Communication which is going to be the most important thing, is crucial, because if you don't communicate with those standards saying, hey, everybody needs to be on at 9 o'clock, things like that, things really start to crumble quickly. And that kind of leads us into tip number 4, which is communicate early and often. As the raid and the patch goes on, you will notice that people will stop communicating because they just kind of say, I could have reached out, but it was just easier to kind of ignore it. Again, this goes back to problem number 1. If there is a problem, fix it. Communicate early and often means communicate about everything. It means about if you're going to be late. It means if you have a family issue, if you need to take a day off, this is the best time to take a day or 2 days or even a raid week off from the game, because you can kind of reset the batteries, get your brain back in gear, and get ready for the next tier. But you have to communicate early and often with your raid team and your leadership. Officers, you should be expecting this from your team, but you should also be leading the charge, saying, hey guys, communicate with me. Let me know if you're not going to be here. Let me know if there's any problems during the raid, because I want to hear about them. I don't know how to address a problem if I don't know that there is one. And this is probably one of the most detrimental things that raid leaders and raiders often don't communicate to each other, because I can only see so much as a raid leader. I'm working with my team on the officers. I'm working with raiders. I'm working on trying to play my character. Sometimes we miss these things. So you have to communicate the issues, whether it be about attendance, whether it be about the raid itself, or something else completely different. You have to communicate early and you have to communicate often. And finally, guys, tip number 5 for you is perspective. This is more of a heady one. This is all about your team and what your goals are. But perspective is everything. If you are a world first Mythic guild, you were probably long done with the content, so you know that you need to take a step back. But if you're still fighting for that top spot, still pushing the content, trying to get to Gul'dan, keep that in mind. Keep everything in perspective. We have another raid tier coming out in about a month. You have about a month of, well, that's what we think. It's coming out in about a month. We have about a month of preparation and a month of Nighthold left to do. So you really have to keep that in perspective when you're pushing your team. Do we need to cut a raid day here? How hard do we need to be going in the paint when we're pushing these bosses? Should we be extending our content? This is all really important stuff that you have to ask yourself. And you have to remember that your team is a reflection of the officers and the leadership. If your team wants to keep pushing, the officers should want to keep pushing. If the raid team wants to pull back, the officers should want to pull back. You have to work with your team to keep your goals and ambitions in line. Now, as Exiled Power is a 2-day raid guild, there's not much that we can pull back on. So we can only kind of amp it up a little bit. And we have a little bit with extending lockouts, focusing on Elisand. We did a little bit of Helya stuff the other day. So you really have to feel out your guild. And this is all about having perspective. If you're tunnel visioned, if you're only focused on what you want to do, it's going to be very challenging to move the team forward. So have perspective. Talk to your team, make sure you're setting those standards for your team, and don't get complacent. Stay hungry for the boss kills, stay hungry to push the content. If you guys have any questions, please leave us a comment below. I'm more than happy to expand or elaborate on any of the tips that I just gave, and I would love to hear how you guys are keeping your guilds moving forward as we head towards the Tomb of Sargeras. If this is your first time on the Exiled Power channel, welcome. Please give us a thumbs up and subscribe. But for now, guys, my name is Codiak, raid leader for Exiled Power, and we will see you next time.